the Evans house, the first convert, around 1764. That was at its original location, but it's been moved here to this site, this Heritage site. You can see all the buildings dealing with the Strawbridges and their early society are brought together. John Evans' house has been restored, and this is the interior, somewhat how it would have looked where the first class meeting in Maryland and perhaps even America was held around this table. They've got the Bible there to show that. The Strawbridge house itself, General Conference of 1940 named it a Methodist shrine. We almost have a Catholic love of pilgrimage shrines, and early Methodists of the 19th century would often make pilgrimage to the John Evans house and the Strawbridge house to find spiritual meaning there. The log meeting house is a replica used by wood from the period, but this is actually the Strawbridge pulpit right here, which was found in the attic, I believe, of the Evans home, even in the 20th century. So when they were moving it, they didn't really recognize the significance of this wood here, and it's actually the original pulpit used by Strawbridge during the period. You can see the kinds of sparse simplicity that you would have within early chapel preaching houses within Methodism. The shrine is complete with statues of Robert in a characteristic preaching pose, with fortunately Elizabeth Strawbridge also commemorated for her role standing by her man and taking care of the home front and leading a class meeting. So we're going to see strong women exercising important early leadership roles within Methodism throughout this early period. Exhorting here. Okay, I just wanted you to be aware of the sites and how we have tried to mark them on the Google Earth material. And you have all those, and you can go state by state in the Americas, and of course you can go country by country throughout the world there. When Methodism arrived with the immigrant population from Ireland in the 1760s, a number of important factors were happening to make Methodism attractive. Christianity had been in the New World and in the colonies for almost 150 years by this time. You can see here a map of the colonies during the 1760s. Georgia included. Maine was actually a part of Massachusetts. But this line of demarcation, the line of proclamation line of 1763, were the borders of the colonies, and the American colonies were restricted, and the colonists were restricted to the line east of this line of proclamation. But Christianity had been already in the colonies for 150 years by the time the Methodists were arriving there. But a number of changes had occurred. I mean, if you look at the various regions of the colonies, there were already relatively strong churches in each part. In the New England area, you had the congregational churches in all areas but Rhode Island, which had a Baptist recognized religion. The New York area, originally a Dutch colony, was part of the Dutch Reformed, strong Reformed church. Going down into Pennsylvania, you had religious tolerance due to the Quakers, so you had a lot of religious diversity there. New Jersey had a strong Presbyterian population, which is still reflected today in Princeton's Presbyterian Reformed orientation there in Princeton, New Jersey. Maryland was an area in which the Catholic Church had originally been strong and continued to flourish, but Anglicanism began to succeed there as well as in Delaware. So from Maryland south, you had the Anglican Church center of gravity and strength into Virginia and the Carolinas and down into the Savannah River area. The Anglican Church, important. But these churches who had enjoyed 150 years worth of presence were undergoing some change in the 1760s. The work of George Whitefield from the 1740s had awakened to conversion many of the denominations in America, and had even left behind a few Methodist converts in Philadelphia, which we'll talk about when we get to the Philadelphia story, which was a good movie, Jimmy Stewart. The awakenings that Whitefield had formed had led to more desire for heartfelt religion, ecstatic, warm-hearted expression of faith. The laity had been challenged, and of course in American life, laity were, during the 1760s, were searching for more authority and claiming more authority within the churches. Bishops and the power of clergy were being ameliorated and lessened to some degree. Laity were taking more ownership of their faith, and this fit well with the Methodist lay-driven ministry. There were no clergy involved. There was ecstatic, almost democratic leadership in the small groups, where people took turns in leadership. And so this fit well with the rising call for democracy and equality in the American life, which will ultimately stir into political independence as well. But the Methodist immigrant population fit in well with this newly awakened lay search for religious understanding. Here in the New York area, we want to tell the story now of the Methodist beginnings in New York. We've already seen the story of the Palatines coming from New York, Barbara Heck in particular. Barbara Ruckle Heck, and you can see the dates for her life there, is often accorded the title the Mother of American Methodism. Having arrived in the early 1760s, this group of Irish immigrants in New York gets to the business of trying to make a living in America, and so they're able to at first worship in a Lutheran church, but by and large their love for the faith had grown cold by this time. The Embrys had lived in the area of Augustus Street, and while living in Augustus Street, a card game was going on one day with the Embrys and their cousins, and Barbara Heck here walks in and sees her cousin Philip and other men who had been good Wesleyans back in the old world. Well, this was the last straw. For Barbara Heck, she'd just seen them backsliding, and she said, "Preach to us lest we all go to hell, Philip Embry." She threw the cards into the fire, and he was so shocked and repentant that he begins preaching in his own house on 10 Augustus Street. But then they moved here, not too far from present-day City Hall, Chambers Street today, but it was called Barrack Street there, and on Broadway and Barracks they began holding preaching meetings there as well. October 1766. Preach to us lest we all go to hell. And so in 1767 the society outgrew the home, and then they went and moved to a place called the Rigging Loft on Horse and Cart Street. You can see it here. Here is an actual engraving of the Rigging Loft here. Down in the wharf area, it was a building designed to house sails for sailing vessels. So it had a high ceiling, and you could gather the increasing number of people coming to hear the Embrys, Philip Embry in particular, preaching the message of free grace, free for all, freely restored, completely in all. So this Rigging Loft is an important area of early Methodist life. Philip Embry is the leader, pioneer lay preacher, and is a carpenter and is able to build the first pulpit there and use it. The class meeting is a diverse group, including an African slave named Betty. It's not clear who owned the slave, and it was not, according to the Wesleyan discipline, permitted to own slaves, but nonetheless, women, African Americans, in a pretty diverse organization there. Moves from card games to class meetings, from the ground up, as it were. Again, here's another engraving of the old loft for about 2 years, 1767 to 1768, at 120 William Street. There were Sunday services held at 6 a.m., and Embry usually in the early days led the way in this rigging loft. In 1767, this man, Captain Thomas Webb, who had been an officer in the British Army and a lay preacher back in Bristol in Great Britain, had been converted under John Wesley. He is in retirement. The Battle of Quebec, he had lost his eye, and British rule over Canada was established in the French and Indian War there, but he is retired on Long Island, and he hears word that there are Methodists meeting in New York City, and he arrives one day with his full military officer's uniform and his sword and regalia, and causes quite a stir. The Methodists there in the Rigging Loft thought perhaps he had come to oppress them or to harass them, as British were known to do in New York there during these colonial days. But he came to say that he was a true Methodist and offered himself and his financial background and his preaching to the Methodists of the Rigging Loft. It's not long before he is able to raise money. He offers 30 pounds of his own money, and a building in the John Street area is erected in 1768, which is considered the oldest American Methodist society continuing in existence, and we'll talk about the John Street Church as well. See here on the map, this is the area, the financial district today of New York City that John Street is built in, and John Street is today a functioning congregation. It is a heritage landmark, and you can visit that. John Street. Through the General Commission of Archives and History, which has a good overview. There were 3 buildings built there. The one that was erected in the original chapel was torn down in 1817. and built in 1818.